What an episode. Heahmund is dead, Lagertha is gone, and Alfred has won the battle. This was the mid-season peak we've been waiting for. Everything that was built up over the last few episodes unraveled all at once. So before we get into the epic battle we got, let's talk about Ivar. So we start off with Ivar sending in his men to clean up the mess of him killing the seer. But they accidentally leave a rag that still has some of his blood on it, and Viksid finds it. The seer was a really significant spiritual figure in Kattegat, and everyone is feeling the effect right away of his death. So Viksid feels like it's their time to step up and see what happened, but he realizes really quickly that Ivar isn't too interested in really investigating this any further. With that and the rag he saw, he puts two and two together and realizes that Ivar had to remove his spiritual competition. I did quite enjoy how he gave him that cheeky "I know" right as he was leaving the room. This really seemed to fuck with Ivar. He looked hella shook. So from that, Ivar really realizes he can't just ignore the seer dying, and puts on this really big speech where he talks about how important he was and great he is and how horrible this is missing, but that they have hope still on him as he is a god. This for me really shows how Ivar's definitely using this whole god stuff more as a way to consolidate his power than any real fantasy of his ego. They even show this really good shot with the light streaming in behind him, the two big banners, very authoritarian, great imagery. I've talked lots about how I really hope Ivar isn't getting duped over by everyone here, especially Freydis. Like him being naive and not understanding he's being manipulated and getting his ego blown up and doing these crazy erratic things doesn't make sense really for his character, and it's really butchering him as this clever figure that we're supposed to know. But in this episode we get to see how he's more using these things to try and build up his power and make sure he can rule very firmly in Kattegat. And it's his clever strategic side that's always been the best side of Ivar, and if we can keep kind of leaning into that and showing that this is more a clever tool he can use to forward his own agenda rather than him actually just being crazy, it works so much better for the character. Like if he's in on the fact that Freydis got pregnant from someone else and he knows that, and this whole time he's been playing her so well just to get an heir out of her, that would be so amazing. Imagine how ruthless it would be for him to pretend to expose all these vulnerabilities and really indulge himself in her just to exploit an heir out of her that he can pass off as his own. So it'll be really interesting to keep an eye on the storyline and this relationship to see if he's really seeing through all this and doing this strategically, or if he's really just being roped into this crazy, delusion of his own grandeur. Love to hear what you guys think on that as well. So let's cross over to Harald when Ubbe arrives to his campment and says yo, what's up, let's talk. So Ubbe tells him about what they've been up to, why they're starting with Alfred, and about the promise of lands. Harald warns that the English are fickle and probably won't actually follow through with the idea. They're all talk, no action. Here's this really good line where he says it's not a matter of negotiation, it's always a matter of blood, which really shows the mindset that Harald has. And then we get the best moment of this entire interaction, where Ubbe says maybe we should come to a compromise. Everyone stops, looks at him, the drums start beating in the background, things start picking up, and then he says that he's a Christian now, and he's been baptized. The music, the actors, the whole environment, everything changes on a dime. Harald rolls back his shoulders, looks at him, he's like, I cannot believe that. It is such a huge offense to them and everything they stand for that Ubbe has betrayed their culture, their religion. It contrasted so well to how Harald was so happy and lighthearted and fun right as he walked in seconds before. And so while Harald is so distracted with this mind-blowing information, Ubbe plays him and throws him the fake deal to stall them so Alfred could move his army in. I really enjoyed Harald this episode, whether it was interactions with Ubbe, with Magnus, the way that realization hit him that he'd been fooled by Ubbe, and of course all the awesome fighting and things we got in the huge battle sequence. Harald always reflects the most stereotypical and best aspects of what a Viking is. He really embraced their culture fully. He raids like them, he thinks like them, he fights like them. When the Saxon boy Magnus walks in, he's skeptical, doesn't understand him, dismissive, doesn't really care, and then he sees that small nugget of information he can actually use from him. It'd be really interesting to see how Magnus and Harald's relationship kind of stay together, as Magnus is definitely not going back to the villa, and he's really committed himself with the Viking side, and Harald's not going to throw away any good men, especially after this big defeat. So maybe Magnus will be a lot bigger of a character than I originally thought. So back in Wessex, we see that Alfred has made clear that he will honour the agreement for the lands in East Anglia if they fight Harald's army. Apparently, England really hadn't thought catapults are a good idea in any way, shape, or form, and Ubbe's the one to bring it up, so maybe he had some constructed or something from what he saw in France, but I don't think he's really much of an architect, so maybe they already had them around somewhere and just didn't really use them. And then Ubbe randomly springs that attacks the king right in front of his men. This is such a classic Viking training way. It's like no like courtyard hitting straw men, no, just like randomly thrash your sword out at the king in the middle of nowhere, in the open, and he has to respond to it. That's how you train a king. It was actually interesting to see how well Alfred really handled himself. He managed to disarm him pretty well, respond pretty well, so the training must have been happening for quite some time at this point, because no one really learns that fast. The best part was how after they finished this big brawl in the middle of nowhere, Alfred's heated, he's pumped, Ubbe just looks at him and then nods his head. So the plan seems to be made up by Ubbe, the catapults, the training, everything seems to be kind of Ubbe pushing the focus on this battle. Bjorn's really just joining him with the fight. We also got a really good scene where Ubbe's kind of pep-talking up Alfred as he's feeling really scared and having doubts about the whole plan and everything. But then Ubbe kind of just grabs him, pulls him forward, looks him straight down with those two beady eyes and says, "Do you want to win?" This is a really strong episode for Ubbe. We see how strategic he is, how willing he is to fight, and how much he's gained Alfred's trust. Still proving that Ubbe's storyline and the relationship between him and Alfred is definitely the strongest part of the season. And I think that Ubbe might have a very interesting role to play in this conflict between Aethelred and Alfred. So Judith does some polite investigation work and finds out that Aethelred, her own son, is the ringleader of a plot to kill her other son. Classic family feuds. Aethelred is a character I feel like is being preyed on by people who want to turn him against Alfred. We've seen over and over again people from the outside trying to break apart pairs of brothers. And again we see that theme arising with these two. Saying that he's a ringleader is almost wrong. He seems to be more a victim of people trying to manipulate him than any organizer or ringleader. He is the central piece that they need and use to overthrow Alfred because he will become king afterwards, but he's definitely not the leader. We saw how they showed the scene of how the lords were circling him like sharks, testing him, prodding him, telling him that he must act now against his brother. When all of the actions that Aethelred has actually done have been pro his brother. He's publicly supported all his actions, fought with his armies, did everything he said, gave him emotional support, fought in battle with him, saved his life, and called off the assassination attempt in the courtroom. He's definitely conflicted about what he should do, where he should be, but I feel like he's almost on the edge of going back to Alfred's side. And after this battle where they fought together and they saved each other's lives and they really bring their bond closer than ever, I think Aethelred has already given up on all of his opportunities to overthrow Alfred. The question is that now Alfred knows what has happened, what will he do about it? I really don't want him to try and execute him in anger or betrayal or something rash like that. I want him to try and get Aethelred to redeem himself and prove himself as loyal to Alfred yet again. I don't want another brother relationship to be broken up because there's just too many of those in this story. But this is when Ubbe comes in. We've already seen Ubbe notice all these different people moving against Alfred. Lagertha told them about the plot to kill the king and he's very aware of the danger. He definitely noticed that they were all looking to Aethelred and Aethelred was looking really nervous, fidgeting with his hands, looking down, shifty eyes, and he knows that he has something to do with it. So maybe when Alfred has finally got over his anger and betrayal and has thought of a way that he will want to redeem Aethelred and he wants to forgive him, he'll kind of go to the room where he is, he's walking down the halls, open the door, and he'll see that Ubbe has stepped in and proactively killed him thinking he was ready to betray Alfred. It'd be such a classic drama trope to see this kind of bittersweet ending to Aethelred, where Alfred was ready to embrace him as his brother and love him and bring him back into the fold, but Ubbe killed him too soon. He couldn't be angry with Ubbe because he knows he had the best intentions, but it wouldn't help things along. It would be like Ollie shooting Ygritte through the heart in Game of Thrones, how Jon Snow had just had that eye connection and still loved him very much, but saw that clearly it wasn't Ollie's fault and he was trying to protect him. But that's just my dark mind at work there. So Heahmund has a vision of hell and it scares him so much that he chooses his lord over Lagertha. She is so angry and heartbroken from this. She came all the way from the Viking world to England just for him, over any kind of choice with Rollo, over just any fighting back for her lands, just to get rejected like this. So then we go into the battle. Lately, Vikings has chose a very particular way to portray these kind of battles and conflicts. They have the grit and the clash and the blood and the mud, but rather than just showing the battle, they show the emotional impact it has on the major players. They have blur and slow-mos and camera shots. They mess and twist with the timeline. They intercut with a super close-up of Alfred's bloody face so you can see no one around him, no context, no nothing, just the voice, just the expression. We actually see Magnus fight like a badass. We see Olafsson go down, Ubbe chopping up people like a badass as well, Harald, Björn, Lagertha, everyone going so hard. And of course, Heahmund dying. Now I'll admit it, I wasn't the hugest fan of their relationship. I think it was the weakest part of the season. But even with the cringy scenes and the forced love, it still hit me when he cried out, to think he saw what he perceived to be hell in the most visible way possible. To see God as that deer in his vision and then again in the battlefield. And still, from all that, to know his love of Lagertha was a sin and that he must reject her right as he knew he was dying, as blood was pouring out of his mouth, he called to her because he chose her and he chose her love. So my fears weren't realized. When we saw that bloody face of Alfred the first time, I thought, oh no, they're going to skip the whole battle. I thought, when I saw Alfred's son die, that they were just going to kill off minor characters that weren't important. But no, they didn't pull any punches, and they actually killed Heahmund. I didn't like the previous kind of weird mashup montage battle we got for episode 10, but this one came off so much better. The setup for it, the actual fighting of it, the way they filmed it, it made more sense, and now we understand their style, we can really feel the battle. This was a fantastic peak to the mid-season. Not only did we conclude so many big things like Heahmund's relationship with Lagertha, but we set up the grounds for a really good season going into episode 20. Björn has a new love interest, someone who met on the battlefield and broke his iron side. Lagertha is missing and there's a mystery behind that. Ubbe and Alfred have made their foundations of their relationship strong, and Aethelred's betrayal has become apparent to Alfred, and now he must decide what to do. So it was a really good episode. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you guys did as well. I want to hear all your thoughts about this episode, where the characters are going, how you enjoyed this battle sequence, what did you miss, what did you want, how much did you like Heahmund? It'll be such a blast to read your responses and really connect over this fantastic episode. Thanks for watching, and Skål!